But we are live, so that's fine. And I'm just going to do a quick comment here to welcome everyone. We would love to know what is on your mind. So first off, welcome to our ZorkCast TravelZork Live. And I will introduce are you my co-host, Mark? I'm going to call you my co-host.
You can call me whatever you want.
Nah, we don't want to do that. So welcome, Marc Meltzer. And Mark, maybe you could just tell everybody a thing or two about you.
A thing or two about me. I love baseball, and I live in Las Vegas. And I like a lot of coffee, which I'll be doing after this.
That sounds great. And you're located in Las Vegas?
Yes, we cannot go to a casino until at earliest May 1st, but I can definitely go outside and walk around with my coffee. So I'll be doing that probably around 2 o'clock my time.
Great. And are you learning any other hobbies, like how to knit or anything like that?
I'm learning that I drink too much coffee.
Yes, but I think we knew that already. So our other guest today is Daryl of 7 Stars Insider, and among other things. Daryl, welcome. Where are you located? And let's tell everybody a little bit about you.
Okay, I'm in Wilmington, Delaware. I'm about 90 minutes from Atlantic City, which is way too close many times. I'm even closer to Harris, Philadelphia, but as you know, everything is closed. So I'm just staying at home, and I think I've been to the grocery store and the liquor store, and that's about it in terms of my activities. And yes, in addition to the 7 Stars Insider, I write a column for the Atlantic City Weekly called Mr. AC Casino. Normally it's every other week, but I actually had an article last week, and there'll be an article this week, which is kind of a follow-up. And it's basically to answer questions that people have sent me about, comp dollar expirations and what am I going to do how do I gamble at home? And we could probably get into some of those things a little bit later.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And we definitely will, because a big focus of today's episode is going to be chatting a little bit about casino loyalty and possibly predictions or just thoughts about, what might change or might not change with regard to casino loyalty this year and also when the casinos reopen. And our final guest today is Dave Grossman of Miles Talk, among other things. Dave, welcome. And where are you located? You're in a pretty exciting city right now.
Yeah, I'm in Manhattan, right in the middle of everything, and day 18 in the apartment that is all of 700 square feet with no outdoor space, and I am slowly losing my mind. So, but I am staying safe.
Great, and you're keeping yourself busy.
I am keeping busy. I'm continuing to do all the Miles Talk blogging, running my other business. I have spent the last 20 hours trying to figure out all the loan programs. So I have been keeping busy. But at the same time, I would love to go outside.
Okay. So yeah, it's a little bit tough for everyone. I mean, this whole transition is a little bit surreal to me. For those who don't know it, I am in London, and it's just become evening, and my neighborhood is very quiet, and it's a little bit different than anything I've ever experienced in my life. But just making do and making the best of everything. I like to remain positive. I also like to keep convincing myself not to worry about things that are out of my control. So I am doing my best not to worry about things that are out of my control. So let's start off with one of my loves is Atlantic City. Daryl, I know you happen to love Atlantic City and write a lot about Atlantic City and have dealt with the casinos there for years. What strikes you about this closure, about what the casino companies are doing, especially Caesars, with regard to the closure? What's on your mind first and foremost when we talk about Atlantic City, casinos being closed, and also the Caesars Rewards program?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the emails I've received, and even my own concern about comp dollar expirations, because some of the casinos have a rolling program. Others, as long as you have some play for 3 or 6 months. They don't expire. But the AC casinos, I think, have really stepped up. All of their websites have very clearly stated that you're not going to lose anything, whether it's your tier status or your comp dollars. Not to point fingers, the only one that hasn't is Golden Nugget. I assume the policy out about their comp dollar expirations, because theirs expire after a year, whether you have activity or not. I'll be curious to know, because I have some expiring tomorrow. So I'll sign on to my account and see what my balance is and see if they are indeed still there. What I've been kind of impressed with is I've received a number of personal phone calls from casino hosts, and I think that says a lot. I mean, and as all of you probably know, these casino hosts have got hundreds, if not 1,000 or more customers. Now, obviously, they're going to focus on the people who they deal with most frequently. But I was very impressed with the number of phone calls and emails that I've gotten from people in the industry checking up on how I'm doing and so forth. So I think that's good. And they realize they're going to have to maintain contact. I mean, mail obviously has dropped off to nothing, and even the emails are non-existent in terms of promotions. I sent out my 7 Stars Insider newsletter today, and I probably got almost 100, not rejections, but I'm out of the office. Here's why, blah blah blah. So I know many of these hosts and executives are indeed checking their emails, because I have gotten some responses. But yeah, it's a little difficult. Some hosts have already told me that they've technically been let go, and I guess they'll reapply, or however their company handles it when the casinos reopen. So it's an interesting time. Certainly nothing that anybody's gone through in the past. So I don't know, Mark, what are you seeing out your way?
It's very interesting. I'm seeing similar to what you're talking about regarding preserving loyalty, but it's more so a wait and see approach that the bigger companies are having, where we're going to freeze everything and come up with a new plan when we're allowed to operate again. So it's nice to hear that you're still hearing from your hosts and such, because I'm fallen out of that level of that status of a gambler, and I'm now just sort of a normal person. So I don't have an excuse to hear from those people. But everyone is working, and knock on wood, the people I deal with are still working and still have jobs, which is honestly the number one concern for most people right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, your audio's gone.
There we go. Before Justin had a really good question, which I guess is directed somewhat at Daryl, but maybe you too, Mark. He said, do you think the future of the Laurel and 7-star lounges are in jeopardy because of any of this? And so I guess maybe pivoting to the point, do we think there will be any significant changes when the casinos actually reopen, or will things be status quo? And of course, I understand this is just your opinion, but any thoughts there on any of that?
Well, I was out there in Las Vegas just before the shutdown. I was out there to attend a retirement party for one of the Caesars executives, and 2 hours before the party was supposed to start, it was canceled. So I had a day, actually 2 days in between before I returned. And the lounges were open that Sunday, which would have been, let's see, this is just before St. Patrick's Day, so the 15th of March. But on the 16th, everything was closed. But I noticed even on the 14th and the 15th, I guess that would be the Saturday and Sunday, the weekend, they had severely cut back on the food that was being offered. They were very cautious, watching any places where there was self-serve. There were a number of pastries, for instance, and some guy walked up to the pastry tray and used his fingers and picked up, whatever croissant or whatever it was he wanted, and they had to throw out the whole tray. Now, that may have been a bit of an overreach, because all he did was touch the one that he was going to consume, but it just shows you that they're very concerned. I went to the Paris buffet for brunch that Sunday. Everything was pretty much normal. And then, of course, that night that was the last that the buffets opened. And I understand, and Mark, you'll know more about this, that some of the casinos are closing their buffets permanently, but some of this was in the works prior to the coronavirus. I've heard. Now, again, I don't have any hard facts on this.
Are they closing the buffets permanently? Like forever?
I did not hear that. I know prior to the governor closing Nevada casinos, the buffet MGM closed their buffets. I don't know if that was permanent though. I believe
the one I heard that was permanent was the Golden Nugget downtown. There was one or two others listed. I don't recall what they were, but they did stress that this was something. And in Atlantic City, a number of the buffets have closed over the last 5 years, and they've turned it into meeting space, or they're just an employee dining room. I'm just not sure that buffets are what they once were, especially now that the prices are, as expensive as going to a fancy sit-down meal. I know if I'm going to spend $50, I'm not going to go to a buffet.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Sorry, I was going to say, to follow up what Daryl was saying about Las Vegas buffets closing. I believe Scott, everyone's good friend at Vital Vegas, he mentioned Golden Nugget was closing and that Treasure Island was closing. And I believe he mentioned those are both permanent closures. I'd be shocked if Treasure Island closed their buffet permanently because it's a family destination and families enjoy the value that you were talking about, Daryl, where you may not be spending $100 at the Bacchanal buffet at Caesar's Palace, but when you go to Treasure Island, you're going to get a valuable or a buffet at a fair value. You're not overpaying for what a buffet is.
Yeah,
so I'll be curious to see if that comes back.
Well, this whole change with this idea about changes in potentially in lounges and buffets when I'm thinking when the casinos reopen has some parallels in the airline industry. And I'm going to have a question for Dave in a second, but just to let you know what's going on in London, British Airways pretty much so has consolidated all of their flights at this point into London Heathrow Terminal 5. They've stopped operations at London City Airport. Gatwick Airport is fundamentally closing down, which is amazing because Gatwick Airport is a gigantic airport. And British Airways has pretty much so closed all of the lounges in T5 also, from what I could tell. I'm sure someone out there is going to correct me, but I'm pretty sure the first lounge and the Concorde room are not closed. Dave, do you have any insight in what's happening in New York with regard to any of the terminals or any of the consolidation with what the airlines are doing or the services for the airlines like at JFK and LaGuardia? I know Amex has closed their lounges.
I know all of the Centurion lounges are closed nationwide. I believe almost all of the airline lounges overall are closing. I think that's more a function of there's just not enough people for it to be worth them keeping them open. I know that there was a brief period, just like you're talking about with what was happening with the casino lounges, that they were going from a serve yourself model to we'll serve you model. And I think whatever lounges are still open, they're being very cognizant about that. But I haven't flown in a while. I mean, when this first started was when I decided I didn't want to be on a plane, well before we sort of completely hit the brake. So I haven't been in a terminal, and I wouldn't want to be. So I think that it makes business sense for them to be closing all of the lounges when you have so few customers. But I think that, tying it all into what you're talking about with the casinos, I mean, it seems to me that once we get back to normal, whenever that is, and acknowledging that normal could be 18 months away, we might have a partial return to normal where everything's operating again and there's sort of limited service lounges or some lounges still haven't reopened, but eventually we'll get back to normal. And I would assume at that point, everything, I would assume the casino lounges and the airline lounges and everything gets back to where they were, but it'll be interesting to see if there's certain things where people, where corporations just sort of decide like, well, we didn't really hear a whole lot about people missing that. So maybe we're just going to keep that scrap. So that would be my fear, but I think largely things will come back to normal. I'm actually much more interested in what's going to happen with various statuses and everything. And I think that it's so interesting as you're talking about how, the casinos aren't committing to anything. And we've seen some of the foreign airlines commit to status extensions. We haven't seen any of the U.S. airlines do that yet. And I think that some people are so, cart ahead of the horse trying to ask, like, what's happening with status next year. And the airlines and the hotels have no idea when we're going to start operating again. If we're operating again June 1st, maybe it makes sense to just, cut everything in half. But if it goes in longer than that, or if travel's very light longer than that, then maybe it makes sense to just extend everyone's status to next year, which is what I hope the majority will do. But we have such limited info now because we don't. It's not like there was a tornado. Like, we just have no idea what this looks like.
Well, what do you think, Daryl, about just concentrating on Caesars? What do you think Caesars is going to wind up doing, or do you have any insight on what they're going to do with tier requirements or qualification for this year? So we're only a few months into the qualification year. What do you think is going on? I mean, I like the idea of just extending the status for a year and making it really simple for people. I'm sure that Caesars Rewards probably doesn't love that idea. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to be a hybrid, or?
I think it's going to be a hybrid. I spoke with a highly placed source, as they say on television, with Caesars before I left, and he made it clear that and we were basically at that time focusing on the merger about what was going to happen, is that at least through next year, through 2021, you're not going to see any changes in the program, and they're also they're determined to be very customer focused so that nobody loses out on anything. So there's a video that Tony Rodeo, who's the CEO, I have it on my website. He essentially says the same thing, that they're not going to penalize anybody, because this is certainly nothing that anybody has any control over. So I wouldn't worry about it. There are just a lot more important things, and I think to Dave's point, the same thing with the airlines. They have many more things to think about than our tier status.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I've seen a little bit of obsession. By the way, I just posted a link in the chat, which should bring you to that video on the Caesars website. I did have that handy. I think, there were bigger things to worry about than status. I do understand a lot of people, especially in the British Airways world, which I follow very closely, are extremely concerned about that. From an overall optics standpoint, sometimes when these companies do decide to make a decision, they go halfway with the decision, and that really confuses people. So British Airways finally made a decision. I know a lot of airlines, like Delta, has not announced what they're doing with status yet. We know it's going to be announced probably in a couple of months, but they haven't announced it. British Airways decided that they would announce what's happening with status for those who British Airways doesn't do a calendar year. So anyone whose status is up in April, May, or June, they've announced a lower tier requirement to keep your status. But of course, my status ends on July 8th. So I can see what it is for April. I can see what it is for May. I can see what it is for June. But now I have no idea what's going to happen with mine. So it's sort of answered a question, but it hasn't really answered a question, which I don't really like. I also have seen other airlines do things, and I might be wrong about this, but I'll give it as a broad example. Singapore Airlines sent a message talking about status and points and things like that, but Singapore Airlines miles expire, KrisFlyer miles expire in a rather draconian way. You can't just earn another mile to extend them. They made no mention of what they're going to do with the expiry of miles in this 1,500-word email. So sometimes I get very frustrated because, companies create these long-winded messages to customers, but yet they don't answer some very pertinent questions. So you actually do create the directive and answer the questions, and you only answer half the questions. That even annoys people more. I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
I've found with the airlines, I've found them all to be not all, but most of them. Alaska's been great, but I found them to be very irritating. United obviously has taken the cake, where they were not allowing you to get a free mileage redeposit for a flight that they canceled. And they, right up until a couple of days ago, were forcing people to pay the redeposit fee, even though the flight was canceled against their will, which I thought was absolutely insane. But to your point about the frustration, I was trying to get after them before that because their terms specifically did not address award travel. They addressed everything else and specifically didn't touch on what happens to an award. So I tried reaching out to them by phone, by Twitter direct message, and just saying very specifically, what are you doing with awards? And nobody would answer me. And so I feel like that, speaks to what you're saying. When in terms of frustration, it's like, we just want to know what's going on. We just want to know what the policy is. And if you just go out of your way, like knowing that there's something that people don't understand, and you have all these FAQs about your waivers and this and that, and then you specifically dodge something that's really important to a lot of people, that certainly engenders a lot of bad will, as does what their actual policy was.
No. I absolutely agree. And I think Han just mentioned United has been among the worst, but I think they've just improved that.
They did.
I think now they finally, I think they finally improved that.
Although they're still keeping money on revenue flights that were canceled and holding them hostage for 12 months. So, I mean, they've gotten better, but they still suck.
Well, we'll get back to that later. Daryl, one of my interesting questions for you, as somebody who gets a lot of casino offers every month. So this shutdown happened, and you had some casino offers, be it for free play, be it for, a new set of dishes or something else that you saw that maybe you were like, wow, this is a great thing I was going to get in April, but now I'm not getting it. How are the casino companies dealing with the future offers, especially the future offers that you know about, which you just can't redeem for the month of April? Has there been much clarity on that?
The only thing I heard, I did a radio interview Monday, and Mike Donovan, who's the head marketing guy at Ocean Casino Resort, specifically addressed that issue and said, the way I understood him, now I may have been wishful thinking, that a lot of the gifts and everything that had been announced to customers that they could pick up were going to still be available once the casino reopened, and that they then would be reevaluating, any other offers. So in other words, the mailings have cut off. My video just cut off too. So they're going to be reevaluating, and the mailings just don't. They're not sending any offers now. But any offers that you've gotten, it sounds to me like they were going to honor, but I haven't heard anything similar from the other casinos.
I hadn't thought about it that much, but a very good point is that any of these giveaways that a casino was going to give, that's a physical product. They've already ordered them and are about to have them delivered, or they've been delivered already. So I guess they sort of want to give them away anyway. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
So if you qualify for some of these, it sounded like what Mike was saying was that they'd be available. So I guess, next time I go to Ocean, I'll have to go with a shopping cart or whatever and collect my crock pots and dishes and all that kind of stuff. But I just, there's not been any official announcement. And I think that's the problem. I think it's just not to repeat things, but they have so many other things to consider right now that a lot of these issues, they just don't want to address, so they're not able to address.
Did Ocean address status at all? Because it expires in April, doesn't it?
No, September 30th. Their year is October 1st to September 30th.
Oh, okay.
Mohegan and Foxwoods are April 1st.
Yeah. Caesars is, as you know, is on a calendar year. MGM is on a October 1st to September 30th year. Golden Nugget, I believe, is now February 1st to January 31st. Tropicana, I think, is based on your anniversary, but again, I'm not sure. They're all slightly different. So the only ones that, and not to get too far off, but it is, I think, related, is the cruise ships. I was in a situation where I had booked a cruise on Norwegian just before the end of March, because their year, quote unquote, is April 1st to March 31st. And I basically needed to go on one more cruise to maintain my status with their casino loyalty program. And of course, that cruise was canceled. So I assume I will lose my status, but I've heard nothing from them. And to be honest, I just don't feel at this time for me to bother them with a question like that. I think it's just maybe a little inappropriate. So I'm holding off on that. Whatever it is, it's going to be. So I have no control over it. But it's like I said, I think that there's just so many other issues right now that comp dollar expirations, that kind of stuff that you've already got in your bank, if you will, that's not going to go away. How they're going to handle tier extensions, that's because you're essentially going to have a month out of your year to earn points. So whether it's prorated or whether they just reduce the amount of tier credits you need for a level, it's anybody's guess.
Do you? Justin was asking. This was directed at Daryl and Mark. And I've heard this question before. A couple of people have brought this up. Do you see any casino never reopening after this? And I guess that could be in Las Vegas or in Atlantic City. Do you think that or maybe make it more direct. If this continues till just May, which is, I think, realistically, I think that we're probably in this for April, but things will start a staggered reopening at some point in May or June. And I have my reasoning for that, which I'm happy to get into. But let's just consider that's the timeline. Do you think this will cause any casino company to not reopen a specific property or use as an excuse to not open a specific property?
I don't see it happening in Atlantic City. It's just, my feeling. I don't have any, data or anything to support it. But I think Atlantic City, everything's going to reopen. The only thing that could affect, and I think it's more an antitrust issue with the casinos in Atlantic City, is New Jersey Gaming Control Commission, or the FCC, being concerned about the fact that if the merger goes through, that El Dorado and Caesars, between them will have 4 properties. But they had 4 even before any merger. Caesars had 4 properties before it closed Showboat. So I don't know if that's even going to be an issue. But there was talk at one point of Bally's maybe closing its casino and just making it a hotel, kind of like the Claridge is now. But it's anybody's guess. Mark would know more about Las Vegas.
Before we pivot to Las Vegas, do you think it's been a little bit of a savior for these casinos in New Jersey that they have all this online gambling now? Because all of the casinos in New Jersey now have relatively robust online portals, which obviously sports betting doesn't really count right now, but they have pretty robust online casinos, which just if this had happened just a few years ago, they would not be getting revenue from online casinos. Have you looked at the impact of that at all, or has anyone really discussed that yet? Because I was thinking the other day, boy, they're really lucky to have these really robust online portals.
Yeah, I saw an article last week sometime, and I don't have the article in front of me, but I want to say that there was some really good numbers. It's premature because they only report once a month, but the online gaming has been a savior for the casinos even before the coronavirus.
Yeah, that's true.
I think right now, those people who need a fix for gambling, that's the to-go place right now, is to gamble online. So I think we'll see some numbers next month maybe to support that. And that was one of the things I wrote in my column last week was how you go about gambling online. And of course, you have to be physically in New Jersey in order to do that. And Delaware and Pennsylvania have a similar situation where their casinos have some pretty good online gaming. But again, you must physically be present in those states in order to play those games.
No, it's interesting. I mean, so pivoting back to you, Mark. So what do you think about this question in Vegas? Do you think that there might be a property that might not open? Or I know you hate to do rumors and predictions, so I don't want to put you too much on the spot.
We actually touched on this briefly last week. I mentioned, I think the bigger companies, MGM, Caesars, with the merger, they'll be fine. We'll have some of the smaller companies that will, depending on how long this goes, will possibly see some effect from it financially. So when you look at independently operated casinos, Westgate's a large company. They might not have the same problems that another smaller company has. And, we're seeing news about Tillman Fertitta might end up going bankrupt just in general. He's losing like $1 million a day approximately. So that could be an issue with Golden Nugget Casino around the country. Somebody in the chat asked if I see Rio going away, and I really don't. Again, I don't know that Caesars wants to get rid of that right now, but if El Dorado's looking to slash expenses, maybe they find a legal way to get out of the lease contract if they don't want to be in that business. We'll hear about that in the future, but I don't know the independent casino business well enough to actually guesstimate who may or may not have enough financing to weather the storm as it is. And just to address something Daryl just mentioned, I did a quick search. New Jersey did $52 million in online gaming revenue last month, in February. So pretty good. That's up 67%, I believe, from the previous year. So yeah, the online gaming in Jersey is legit. Nevada, we only have World Series of Poker and a handful of sports betting apps, which, are still operating. So I unfortunately, I don't have a good handle on the business side of independent casinos to give you a specific, this is very likely going to happen on that side. But if you look at independent casinos in Las Vegas, there's not too many of them. And I'm sure we'll hear about it as things continue.
So going a little bit to the travel side right now, and thank you very much, Mark, because that's all actually really insightful and good stuff. And I have a few more questions for you, but just to go to Dave for a moment on the travel side, and we were just talking about status, and I tend to be a lot of Daryl's opinion on this kind of stuff, that I don't really want to worry about this stuff that much right now. I don't like mixed messages from companies, but I don't want to worry about it. You run an online community called Miles Talk, which has a Facebook group. And I'm sure a lot of people are really concerned about status and have a lot of questions, and I see in that world, the miles and points world, that I think people are too obsessive about this stuff. What's your take on it? I mean, I think, to me, my take is usually, let's just be patient. Let's give it a little bit of time and see how things work themselves out. I get a little less patient when a company announces something and I think it's not thoughtful. But what's your opinion? What are you seeing from people that follow you and people that regularly deal with, just the whole travel loyalty situation?
Yeah, I think you're right about sort of everything that you just said all at once, which is people are worried too much about it. And I think that's a function of, one, that's what we do, right? Like, people that are obsessed. I mean, just like you guys in the casino world are, very, very into what's happening with your comp dollars and your offers and your status. So with airlines and hotels, a lot of us really spend a lot of time plotting how we're going to qualify, right? Like, for example, with Marriott, I'm 4 years away from Lifetime Platinum, and I have, definitely been I would like to knock that out in 4 years and then never think about it ever again. And so until yesterday, I was very concerned, what are they going to do? And, at the same time, I'm like, well, they'll figure it out later. But I kind of want to know anyway. And then Hilton, last week kind of took the gauntlet, and they just said, all status is going to be extended for an extra year. And that really elevated Hilton, where Marriott has said nothing. Marriott, of course, says nothing about a lot of things. At the same time, you're 100% right that it's fair for the loyalty programs to not make a decision yet, because it's not the top thing that they need to be worrying about. All of these companies are trying to not go bankrupt. And I think that to your other point, which was part of the same point, someone could shoot themselves in the foot by making a decision now without seeing how this plays out, right? In terms of as a business, because loyalty at its root is a tool to drive consumer behavior. And so if you've already given, think about it for a second, like the Fed, right? Like, the Fed's already gone to zero on interest rates. What do they have left? So Hilton is already they've already lowered interest rates to zero now, right? So Hilton they've given you everything for next year already. And on the one hand, that's really great. On the other hand, they don't know where this is going over the next 2, 3, 6, 12 months. And Marriott, by not making a decision yet, and Hyatt, by not making a decision yet, gives themselves the ability, well, Hyatt has for people in Asia, but they give themselves the ability to really see how this plays out. And I think you're going to see one of two things. You're either going to see something equivalent to a challenge for status, where it just, it's a lower requirement. If things get going again in July, it's real easy to go, okay, for, Marriott, for example, instead of 50 nights, you need 25 nights or 30 nights. And you make that decision now, and then you wind up in a situation where either you've just made the wrong decision and you stand by it, or you have to change your answer, which is just confusing to everybody. So I actually agree with kind of holding out. And I want to answer Han, who has two questions. Well, one, yes, I was at FTU in DC, and it was a whole lot of fun. And I'm glad we were able to get that in under the wire. And I thank Michael and Tommy for having me there. As far as the question about is it a bad time to apply for airline credit cards for sign-up bonuses, and also I hear the affiliate links are being pulled for credit cards. So to address that completely straight and honestly, yes, I'd say 80% of credit card affiliate links have been pulled. It's going to hurt all of the bloggers in a huge way, because that's how most of us make most of our income from all of this. For me, it's not going to change anything about what cards I recommend, but it's definitely going to hurt my wallet. And the airline sign-up bonuses, I think you just have to look at the exact same way that you've always looked at them, which is if you are interested in that card, if it's not going to mess up your credit card strategy, like your 524 strategy, and it's an all-time high offer. Like if you haven't had one of the Delta cards and you actually know what you're doing with Delta miles and value them, their all-time high offers, you're not doing the wrong thing to pull the trigger on that, again, with everything else considered that you normally would. At the same time, I'm certainly not rushing to acquire airline miles, because I think what's going on now really amplifies the message that I've had ever since I started Miles Talk, which is focus on transferable currencies, because you can do what you want with them when the time's right, and the ability to cash them out a lot easier than an airline mile just amplifies that message.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you or interject before we get back to that. Before we get back to that topic a little bit, because I have a couple of thoughts on that. Daryl, Mark, do you think, I always worry that after financial crisis or during financial crisis, sometimes casinos will use something as a reason for cost cutting. Like we were talking a little bit about, I wasn't so sure with the buffet closures originally, when I think it was MGM that announced the buffet won't close for a week. And somebody said, well, yeah, they're not closing the buffet for a week because they still have a week's worth of food. If they thought it was really bad, if it was really urgent, wouldn't they close it tomorrow? Instead of saying we're going to close it in a week. And I'm not so sure about that. But the $1 million question is, will certain things become more customer friendly, like resort fees? Do you think now that the casinos need to attract more people, both status and non-status people, do you think they'll roll back on some of the ancillary fees, like resort fees, or do you think they'll still continue with them? Because that's sort of an interesting thing to look at. And I would think from a marketing perspective, that could make a pretty big difference, especially if someone jumped on it first. So do you have any opinions about things like resort fees changing or parking fees, or do you think they're just going to stay away from that topic?
The resort fees and parking charges seem to be more of a Las Vegas issue. I don't know if Mark agrees or not. Atlantic City, the resort fees are not nearly as high. And I rarely hear many complaints from people about those resort fees because the room rates, if you qualify, are so low that people look at the total package and say, gee, I'd be hard pressed to get a room, ocean view room at that rate at a travel lodge down the street or something. So that hasn't seemed to be an issue in Atlantic City. And Atlantic City casinos have always charged for parking, so that's not been an issue. And the threshold, it's probably the same. I can only speak for Caesars, is so low that almost hardly anyone pays for parking unless they don't have any sort of a casino loyalty card. And some of the casinos, Golden Nugget, for instance, they stopped charging for parking a couple of years ago. Resorts stopped charging. At least during the winter months, they're right on the ocean. So a lot of the people who are parking in those lots are just they're not even coming into the casinos or using their restaurants. They're just coming for a beach day. So for them to pay $25 to park for the day, they don't seem to object to that. So
do you think
I
it's
don't know
more?
if
So I mean, I do agree. Sometimes it is more of an emotional response, and I think in Vegas it especially has become an emotional response because there is the other side, and I see both sides of it. In Vegas, sometimes you can pick up a hotel room for $15 and pay a $30 resort fee, but even 30 plus 15 for a hotel room is still a really good deal. But it still upsets people. And of course, on the comp end of it, the one thing that I will say is that I think any company in which you get mid-tier status or higher should waive the resort fees for their players. I think that's just something that tier status should do. I think Caesars does a phenomenal job with that as a benefit. I don't think MGM does a good job, and I don't know why, for example, like MGM Platinum as a tier benefit, not a discretionary benefit, why they don't just waive the resort fee if you've gone through the trouble to get Platinum. That sort of bothers me.
Michael, the problem is that MGM properties, they're not, unlike Caesars, their policies are not the same throughout the company. If I want to go to the Borgata, even though I have platinum status with MGM, I'm going to pay a resort fee. If I go to Las Vegas, I don't pay a resort fee, or at the Beau Rivage down in Biloxi. And a lot of their programs, a lot of the elements of their program, as I say, just are not consistent throughout all of the MGM properties. So that's another problem with MGM.
Yeah, and that's one thing Caesars has always done really well with their loyalty program, is making things consistent. And I think from a mass market consumer perspective, people like that because they can learn and understand the way the program works. So what do you think, Mark? What do you think about fees or potential changes to fees or no changes to fees? Do you think anything like that will happen when the casinos reopen or when they really get going for the rest of the year?
Well, I think we've noticed in the past year that the companies, especially MGM, have been rolling out promotions for much more to leisure travelers, where you will get a complimentary parking or a reduced resort fee or something to that effect. So I think we will continue to see that more and more often with registered players as another way to keep getting people to come in. The prices for rooms, like you said, all in, they're still fair. You're looking at, the base price is $15. When you look at it, it's $50, let's say, for room deluxe or per night. It's still better than you're going to pay maybe off the strip at a Howard Johnson or something. I believe there's still one Hojo left here.
I was wondering about the choice of Hojo because I haven't heard someone mention a Howard Johnson in a long time.
Daryl had me thinking about one of the times I stayed in Atlantic City and paid $328 for the privilege of staying at a Super 8 hotel, or $250 to stay at a Ascot Inn, which I believe is closed, and there was blood on the walls, and it was just a murderous place that we just needed a bed to crash in. That was there. But I think in general, we will see more active promotions. We will see reductions across the board if possible. But I think they're going to take the fee structure and try to keep it as long as they can.
I tend to agree. I tend to agree with that.
But I do see them offering more and more promotions to existing customers to keep their loyalty. So if you're looking at a room at Luxor, you might legitimately pay that $15 with no resort fee, no parking fee. They're going to have to be very aggressive with the marketing towards new and existing customers. It'll be interesting, I think, to see how the convention part of this plays out, because the fees exist for convention people, for those visiting for conventions, because they're working on business budgets, on corporate budgets where, hey, it's not my money. I don't care what I'm paying. And I think corporations might have an issue with that. Again, when they can return, whenever that may be for for the expos. So that's, in my mind, more of the way to look first to get an indication of how the promos will trickle down.
No, that's very interesting. Catherine, aka Coach Kitty, said something interesting, which is obviously a very small group. She said, I just recently read a long discussion on one of the AC boards about what people are going to do when the casinos reopen. She says half of the people are not going to run back. These are heavy players too. It's not a good sign. Now, what's interesting to me about that is I think so much of what we do, and this is probably more of a psychology kind of thing, has to do with our routines and what we're used to. Like, for an example, I go for a shave every week at a Turkish barber. I never shave myself, but now I've got to shave myself. So now I'm getting in the routine of, using my Gillette razors and shaving myself every couple of days, which I hate, but I'm doing it. If this goes on for a month or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, I'm going to have to do something to get back into the routine of walking up to Hampstead Barber and having Fez give me a shave every couple of days because my routine has been broken, right? And you have so many people in Atlantic City who come almost every single weekend, and they have this routine of going to AC, and now that routine has been broken. Do you think that'll have an impact on people? Because I haven't really thought about that a lot, but it must.
Well, this is going to sound like heresy, and I probably shouldn't have did this, but I told a friend a couple of days ago, and it's only been about 2 weeks or so since this is all over. I said, I don't miss it. My stock portfolio might be down, but my bank balance is staying steady or increasing. So I enjoy it. I've always, matter of fact, I describe myself as a recreational gambler whenever I have to write a bio for some sort of an interview or an article. And I really do feel that way. I mean, I'm not so hung up on it that it's not like a drug or whatever. Again, I've never done drugs or that kind of stuff. But, I honestly, the longer it goes on, the less I miss it.
Well, what's interesting about that is I've always been a person that advocates fewer casino visits. So I was always the person who was to say, if you go to a casino twice a month, or if you go to a casino every 2 weeks, why don't you go every 5 weeks and build a bigger bankroll and play stronger when you go to the casino? And of course, I was thinking probably while I was shaving the other day, because I have all that time when I shave, I was thinking the other day, wow, this is really great, because if people save up all that money for their bankroll, now when they go back to the casinos, they can say, I'm not going to go as often as I would regularly go. And now I've built up this really nice bankroll because I haven't been into casinos for 5 or 6 weeks. And now I can approach this a little bit differently than I approached it before. So I thought that could be a sort of interesting perspective for people. I'm not sure, but
what Daryl just said, I've heard echoed in the sports world as well. People are finding new ways to entertain themselves with, whether it's watching Tiger King on Netflix or just binging through everything that's available. The sports world is concerned that people will have found other ways to entertain themselves and not want to spend money going to a stadium. And a similar thing, do you want to be close to 50,000 people, 20,000 people? Do you want to spend the money to risk whatever there might be? And I believe somebody just asked about social distancing in the future. We'd have no idea how people are going to react to this when this is all said and done, and when we can all get back to quote unquote normal, whatever that may be at the time. So, and I think it's going to be that way with travel. I want to fly and visit my parents in Pennsylvania, but I don't know how soon I'm going to be eager enough to get on an airplane. So I think what Daryl said about casinos, what I'm hearing about the sports world, and with travel in general, we're all going to have issues when we come back.
No.
Well, the last day I was out in Las Vegas last month, they were shutting down every other slot machine. They were taking away every other seat or two at the bars, to accommodate the social distancing. So, if there are fewer people coming out there, they can afford to do that because those machines aren't going to be used anyway. But I think we're going to see some changes like that. Somebody today emailed me and said, gee, if you have any persuasion over the casinos. Tell them to wash their chips more frequently. All that kind of stuff. The cleanliness that I saw when I was out there for that weekend, I didn't see any customers with gloves or masks, but I did see lots of casino employees constantly cleaning machines and wiping things down, which gives you a little bit of sense. I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, I could just as easily be hit by a car or get some other disease then I'm going to still go to the casino and I'm not going to do any extra precautions." But you do feel a little better when you see the employees cleaning things up and what the casinos were doing on that last day before they closed.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I will interject. A funny thing is that I feel that I was always socially distanced by Chinese people at baccarat because of all the reserve tables that they would never let me join in at and play. But I think this whole idea of routines and what we're getting used to, like, hey, I was a sports fanatic and now I'm able to survive without sports every day or survive without going to Atlantic City every weekend. I think this is going to have a huge, huge impact on business travel, and specifically high revenue business travel, because I think now that people are working virtually and they're making it work and they're being forced to work virtually, there are companies that spend tens of thousands of dollars on business travel every year for the big purpose of, their employees to meet with customers and meet with each other. And one of the reasons there has been that working virtually doesn't have the same impact, which I agree to some extent. Depending on the business you're in, you do need face-to-face meetings. But I also think once people have worked virtually for 20 days, 40 days, 30 days, and they see it works, I think that is going to impact travel budgets in the future, because I think companies are going to say, well, we were operating virtually. I don't think we have to do as much travel. And I think it's going to take, much differently than 9/11, I think it's going to take a very long time for that business travel to come back. And without the high revenue road warrior business travel out there, which does subsidize a lot of the less expensive seats on airlines, I think this airline recovery and, recovery of routes, recovery of networks, recovery to flights, I think it's going to take a very long time, personally. So I think this is really unprecedented in a lot of ways. Do you have any thoughts about that, Dave?
I do actually. You could read it in my eyes, couldn't you? I think that everything you're saying is completely accurate. I think people are getting very used to things, and I think that the only thing that I would add, because I agree with everything that you just said, is that I think people are discounting what the return to normal looks like. So I think there's two sides to it. I think one is everything you just said, where people are going to decide that they don't need to do certain things that they were used to doing their entire lives, and they don't come back at all to whatever that was, or they come back but much less. I think the biggest impact for everything related to business travel, but also specifically casinos and all of that, is I think we're going to see a very two-tiered re-entry. And I think what I mean by that is I think we're going to hit, whatever month it is, let's call it June or July, maybe the summer does help stop the virus from spreading. It goes way down, and maybe the government's kind of like, all right, everything kind of reopen, but keep your social distancing happening. And, maybe people are wearing masks. Who knows where that goes? But I think so many people still, first of all the high-risk people are still not going to want to go out because we still won't have a cure. A lot of what I see in Atlantic City is older people. Maybe not as much at Borgata, but the other casinos. And then, so I think you're going to see these things start to reopen, and they're going to be really excited about reopening, and they're just not going to fill up in any way, shape, or form. And then you're going to have this sort of like things that kind of go like up, and then they're going to be like, we can't pay the staff for the levels that we're at. We thought more people would come back. And I think you're not going to get back to normal until there's a vaccine. And so if they're saying that could be 18 months, I think that's when the normal happens, except to your point about maybe the new normal is a different normal.
I'm not sure so much about the vaccine issue as, people tend to have rather short memories, but at first I think people will be fearful or worried about what they're doing.
I mean, more the high risk. I think what the guidelines might be for high risk people before there's a vaccine.
Yeah. So what do you think, Daryl? What's your, we're going to wrap up here in a just a few minutes because we don't want to keep people too long. What's top on your mind with regard to the casino closures right now? Or is it not even top on your mind and you're just sort of taking things day by day and we'll see what happens?
Yeah, I'm sort of a mix between that and the fact that I don't think it would be wise for any casino to open any earlier than May 1st. I hope hopefully it's been updated. I think Illinois or Missouri is talking about opening up next Monday, April 6th. I think that would be criminal. But I think even once the casinos are open or other businesses, it's going to be a while before you you make that trek to Atlantic City or and again to bring back on the cruise ship. I talked to some friends out in Lake Tahoe this morning. They are booked on a cruise in August, and they are going to cancel. They don't think even August is a good time, if ever they're going to go on a cruise again, because of the horror stories that we've all witnessed.
Well, I'm not a paranoid person, and I'm a fan of ocean liners, especially Cunard and the Queen Mary and all of that and the history. And I never have considered myself a paranoid person when it came to norovirus or any of those kind of things. I'm just one of those like, okay, things happen, but it doesn't scare me. I'm not uncomfortable about most things when it comes to travel, air travel. Other things don't worry me. Even after this initial period, I am nervous about cruises. I mean, for a number of things. Are you feeling that too? And I sort of feel bad about it because I try not to be a paranoid person, but considering the way things played out with a number of these ships and the ships that are still floating out there, like not docking right now. I think one or two of the Holland America ships. That really does get me nervous.
Yeah. No, I feel that way. I mean, I've become a real cruise fanatic over the last few years. And when I say I don't really know that I miss the casinos that much, I still miss the idea of going on a cruise. I mean, my standard line is unpack once and let somebody take care of you for 7 days. And I'm going to miss that. I'll be honest.
Yeah, so maybe the cruises will find some way to disinfect or deal with control of germs and viruses in a better way. I know that Delta announced, and probably Dave knows this better, that they have this new process where they're fogging all the planes after a flight to get rid of, I guess, germs and viruses and things like that. So there might be ways with technology that they'll be able to deal with some of these things. It's obviously more costly, just like I think we were talking about casino chips. I think casinos are now going to look at like cleaning their chips more often or disinfecting their chips every single night. Obviously, it's going to cost them more money to do that, but if it's going to make customers feel better, and maybe cleaning standards will go up, because that's been a big complaint at a lot of hotels over the years, especially to like just the baseline cleaning standards are not that good in the average hotel room. So maybe that'll change too, that hotels will have to say, hey, we are bringing this to a higher standard because we need to do that to make our guests feel comfortable. So it could be interesting. So anything else on your mind, Mark? Anything you want to close with regard to Vegas, or anything that's hit you this week that was sort of interesting?
I did want to ask Daryl what his favorite diamond lounge is in Atlantic City.
Well, now, not to correct you, but they're called Laurel Lounges now. And actually, my favorite is Bally's, because it's got that big, long bar. I'm not one to go to I might go for lunch at those lounges, but, in the evening, I like to go there for a couple of cocktails and chat with my favorite bartenders, and then go to a real restaurant for dinner. But that Bally's bar, and my pal Sandy and Frank, who were the bartenders there, they're among the best in town, and I do enjoy that.
That was always my favorite when I used to live on the East Coast. So I was just curious if it's still up to snuff.
Well, there was another question by Han, and I guess this is a trivia question about.
I was going to address Steve Ross asked a question about Las Vegas casinos. And right now, this morning, Governor Steve Sisolak has said that the non-essential businesses are going to be closed through the month of April. So the soonest we'll see casinos reopening in Nevada is on May 1st at the earliest. Again, we talked about rushing back to the casino as soon as they open. That's a different story. But the earliest at all they could open is May 1st. But again, we don't know what the spread is of this. We're looking at a peak infection rate, I guess, at the end of the month, on the 23rd, I believe. So that only gives a week left before casinos may be able to reopen. So I think you mentioned June 1st might be the first day. That's looking more realistic, but honestly, I have no idea. I'm just going by the dates that the governor is allowing people to assume is the next step in this stay-at-home order.
Yeah, no, that's sort of interesting. On the trivia side, I think Han asked earlier, are there were in the entire Caesar system, there are 3 7-star lounges in the entire Caesar system now, 2 in Atlantic City and 1 somewhere else?
There's 2 in Atlantic City. There's 1 in Hammond, Indiana, which is spectacular. It looks like you're inside of, speaking of cruise ships. And then Harrah's Cherokee has it's connected to the Laurel Lounge, but there's a separate entrance which takes you into the same check-in desk as the other entrance. But it has a separate menu, and you can go over and mingle with the plebeians and get some food from the other section. But those are the only ones that I'm aware of. So you're right, 3, I believe 3 dedicated, and then 1 that shares. And then some of them do special menus, like in Laughlin. The Laurel Lounge. I'm going to still be saying it like Mark. They have they all have priority entrance for 7 stars, but you can order off a special menu as opposed to just go take stuff from the buffet. Now, again, all this is going to be subject to change, once the reopenings start taking place. So, be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think different than airline lounges. I think casino lounges, especially for their top tier customers, are a hugely important perk for people. Not that airline lounges aren't important for people, but at the end of the day, you're not going to choose not to fly from point A to point B because the lounge isn't open or because they no longer have food. You will choose to shift your business from Casino X to Casino Y because they no longer have a VIP lounge, potentially. So it's a little bit different. I guess the only other curious question is, do you have a favorite casino lounge in the entire country, or is that too broad of a question?
Me? Oh gosh. Not really. I mean, as I said, they're not a big part of my my casino life. I mean, as I say, I'll go there for some cocktails. After a while, you get it's hard to adjust to paying $17 for a cocktail when you can go into the lounge and have a drink for free. So that's my incentive for going into those lounges, is to have a cocktail that doesn't cost me anything other than a gratuity. But as far as the food and stuff, that's not a major issue.
Great. And how about you, Dave? What's your favorite airline or casino lounge in the country? I'll open it up.
Actually, I mean, my favorite, I have two favorite lounges, but one is because of the staff and one is because of the lounge. So Ocean in Atlantic City, when I had the black card, and since I don't gamble much, that was a really special thing. And we got to know this guy, Ben. And actually, even after we got engaged, we went down there for a weekend, and Ben wasn't around. We got him, and he was so happy for us. And that's a really cool feeling. So I get why some people, it's just like your local bar, right? So I like that about Ocean. But Amphora at Borgata, which Michael, you told me was worth getting to know. And I went there last summer, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic lounge. There's great food plus the full bar, huge space. So definitely would say Amphora.
Now, totally agree, Dave. And that's one of the few places that I will have a real meal on dinner.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, two of us, since you're only able to take one guest, we took a couple there and had a lovely evening. I mean, the service was great, the food was great.
It's really good. I love the Borgata buffet. So it's just like a mini buffet plus open bar.
Yeah,
great stuff.
Good.
No, it's really great. So, Mark, do you have a favorite lounge, or is this just making you miss Atlantic City?
I just sent it into the chat room. I agree with Dave and Daryl. Like
Did I
the
miss that?
M4 lounge.
Oh yeah, you did say M4. Yeah,
by far the best lounge I've been to as far as the VIP lounges. When we look at Laurel lounges, I love Bally's Atlantic City in Nevada in Las Vegas. I think Harrah's has the best staff, and it's huge, and it's one of the ones that has actual full, very mediocre, if at best, meals. But the staff there is just phenomenal, and I would rather go there than anywhere else. Even my previously favorite, Planet Hollywood Lounge. The staff there is just not as good as you'll find at Harrah's, which I think will surprise a lot of people.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love those insights. I also, but we're running out of time. But I also have a couple favorite lounges. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. But there are a couple of things that do compel me sometimes with lounges. But I think it is a very interesting conversation. And if nothing else, it gets our mind off of the fact that we can't visit the lounges right now. So any final closing words, Daryl? I guess I'll just step through everybody. Anything else on your mind that you would like to share? Or
yeah, we talked at the beginning about the 7 Stars Insider. You don't have to be a 7 Stars player or card holder to value, but if you play at the Caesars properties, I think the 7starsinsider.com website and the monthly newsletter that I put out one today. It comes out the first of every month. It's totally free. I don't accept advertising. It's a valuable resource for people. I would encourage people just to the best place to go to get all these links on my sites is MrACCasino.com. Just no periods or anything. It's just MrACCasino.com. And there are links to how to get the newsletter, the other websites that I write for, and the column that I write for the newspaper. So I always enjoy having more subscribers and get the word out up to people.
Yes, and I thank you so much. I just put the links to all of that in the chat area. Thank you so much, Daryl. I've been following you for years. I also notice I don't know if it's some of the old Yahoo boards, I don't know if it's VP free or whatever, but you are always so kind and so generous answering questions all the time about the entire Caesar system, which I really appreciate, and just your absolute knowledge of all of the details of all of the casino systems. And I know you've been all of the Caesars properties. I know you've been doing this for a lot of years, but I just wanted to tell you that I personally appreciate that a lot. And I'm sure a lot of people out there do, because you really, I mean, boy, do you cover it when it comes to Caesars properties.
Well, thanks, Michael. And we shouldn't forget TravelZork. Your website, where I do a monthly Atlantic City wrap up for the coming month, which of course was a little difficult this month because we don't know what's happening. But there is all the information about the comp dollars and other things to do with your time. So also check out TravelZork.com.
Thank you. And Mark, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today?
I thought I just shared my final thoughts, but
these are your final. These are your really final. This is the actual final.
My shut up and go thoughts are: I can't wait to go outside. It's 80 degrees, and I can't wait to walk in the park with a cup of cold brew.
That sounds great. And Dave, any final thoughts for you today? And also tell people about your Facebook group and where to find you. I will throw a couple of those links up right now too for everyone.
Sure. Well, now my final thought is I wish it was 80 degrees in New York City and I could go for a walk with a cold brew. I think it's like 50 out. In fact, I don't know if I'm going up to the roof or in a real walk, but I am going to try and get outside because I literally have not been outside in 4 days, which is driving me absolutely nuts. My other closing thought before the closing thought is that when we were talking about lounges, I just suddenly was thinking about the Virgin Atlantic Clubhouse for airline lounges. And that's by far my favorite airline lounge ever, just in terms of the made-to-order meals and the drinks that you get there and really cool space. And so, yeah, just to close out, I mean, I see a lot of Miles Talkers here, so that's awesome to see. But if you're not already in the Miles Talk Facebook group, just go to Facebook, type in Miles Talk, and click groups. Would love to have you there. Obviously, milestalk.com. You can sign up for the daily or the weekly newsletter, just a digest of whatever I post that day or week. And Twitter, Instagram, Miles Talk. Just love interacting with people. So say
Great.
hi.
Well, thank you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
for joining me. This was great fun, and be safe and have a wonderful evening. Take care, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.